Hi, welcome to our session on the electric vehicle charging network. We really thank you for your interest in this program, and we're really excited about rolling it out over the coming months. Before we launch in, I just want to acknowledge that we are broadcasting today from Kaurna land and pay my respects to the traditional owners and elders past and present. So next slide please, Simone. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you could just please keep your video and your microphone off, so just make sure you're muted during the presentations. You can ask a question at any time. There should be a little icon in the top right that looks like a speech bubble with a question mark in it. It should say show Q&A, so put your questions in there anytime and we will address them at the end of the presentations. Next slide please. So today we have speaking Mark Borlace from the RAA. Mark is the Senior Manager of Future Mobility and brings a lot of knowledge and experience in the future of electric vehicles in South Australia. And we also have Peter Nattrass, who is Manager of Future Industries for the Department for Energy and Mining, and myself. I'm the same team as Peter. Next slide, please. So what we're going to look at today is Mark's going to talk about some of the recent RAA research around the state of electric vehicles in South Australia, and he'll be touching on consumer attitudes and preferences, which is, there's some really interesting things in there. We're going to look at what a statewide charging network looks like, where the chargers are going to be, what they'll be comprised of, what are the benefits to you as site hosts, how we identified the locations, how we're actually rolling out the network, and also just some thoughts around what makes a particular site suitable and what prospective site hosts need to be mindful of moving through the process. Next slide, please. So next up is Mark Borlace from the RAA to speak. Mark.
Thanks you, Yvette. Today, I suppose, is about giving some insights into whether these, electric vehicles are real or not, in the sense of whether they're going to come to market and how quickly do we need to prepare. And I'll just get you to go to the next slides, please, Simon. So this is typical of some of the forecasts that are saying electric vehicles sales as a percentage of new vehicles, and very conservative figures are still saying it'll be 60% of all new sales by 2040. Now, the reality is that'll come much quicker, and there's a couple of reasons why that'll happen. Is that some manufacturers have already declared their intention to have phased out the sales of new internal combustion engines in their own companies by 2030, 2035. Some countries have already signalled that you won't be able to sell internal combustion vehicles in those countries at similar times, and the price of batteries and therefore electric vehicles is coming down, at a reasonable rate. Next slide, please. So what happens is this just mimics both of these graphs just mimic what I was saying as well, and how which countries will be taking up. Obviously, China is a big user of them now, probably the largest, has the largest fleet of electric vehicles anywhere in the world. And one of the spin-offs of that is that the economies of scale that they've got have allowed them to bring things to market, like there's a Chinese brand called MG. They picked up the old British brand and are selling it that, but substantially it's just a Chinese electric vehicle. They've got they're in the mid 40s, $40,000, and they've got a range of 300k. So they're starting to get within the reach of ordinary people, and we expect that as some other manufacturers and Chinese manufacturers as well come to market, that price competition will be quite strong. And forecasting that in some models you may actually see what they call price crossover or equilibrium, where essentially you get electric vehicle be costing the same as an internal combustion engine, and about then we think that's when it'll start to take off, because once people have driven electric vehicles, the quietness, the power of them, the lack of running costs, very, very low cost to run, then the uptake will be much greater. Next slide, please. So South Australia in particular, this is one of the surveys we did have Deloitte do for us only a month or two ago. It was about the appetite for South Australians for electric vehicles, and we've got a greater appetite for taking them up than most of Australia. And per capita, we've got the largest amount of sales of any state except for the ACT, which has had some very aggressive incentives and government buying programs in there. But the reality is that we will start to see them, as I say, come maybe to this state quicker than potentially other states. Let's just go to the next slide. So the two inhibitors to the uptake have been the what they call range anxiety, the ability, the fear of getting to a place where you can't recharge your vehicle or get back because the infrastructure is not there, and the price. And as I previously said, the price point will be coming down. So the issue now is to make sure that people feel comfortable if they buy a electric vehicle, even with a 1, 2, 3, 400k range, that they know that they'll be able to get out there and get it charged on a journey or at the destination, and not be stranded. So that's part of what the government obviously are trying to do with this incentivification of co-funding of some infrastructure to get it out there at tourist destinations, at places where people stay, and essentially make that promise true. If we can go to the next slide, there's also some misunderstandings in the market, and we're working to address this, but a lot of people still think the cars won't travel terribly long distances, 100-200 k's, whereas the reality is that most of the common vehicles will do, as I said, the MG will do 300, the $60,000 Hyundai Kona SUV will do over 400, and a lot of the more expensive ones as well will do the 500 and 600 k's. So they're getting to sort of fuel tank, petrol driven type mileages, and therefore the functionality is the same there. We obviously, the RAA is encouraging our members to buy them. The 768,000 members we've got will be making them aware over the next couple of years with various articles and promotions in the magazines and other communication to explain the virtues of them, because there's a couple of other policy advantages that we get from the electric vehicles. One is we start to reduce our energy reliance on imported oil, and so one, we've got a energy supply here, but secondly, instead of Australian dollars going out to foreign oil companies, it'll be that energy being spent here with our own energy companies. The other thing is the environmental benefits of it, especially in a state like South Australia, which has got a very green electricity system compared to other states, and getting greener all the time will mean that the tailpipe emissions, etc., that you get from other vehicles is gone. And you also have the issue of there'll be less servicing and maintenance, so there'll be less oil produced, less even things like less brake wear. A lot of the road pollution is brake dust, and with the electric vehicles that have got regenerative braking, some of those will go for 100,000 k's or more without need for friction brakes in their car, because of the way they're able to retard the car using turning the motor into a generator and what they call recuperating, regenerating power back into the battery, and that's where some of the efficiencies come. So in summary, I suppose the RAA knows that these are coming. Even our own business practices, we are making sure that the country contractor network out there that are going to be seeing these vehicles, we're starting the training for them. to make sure that you know they've got all the knowledge out there as well. So it's an exciting time, and we just need to explain to everybody why they are the future. They're not going to go away. They're probably going to come quicker than we probably forecast originally, and we need to have the infrastructure in place for when they get here, and that's where Peter and his group and the state plan are designed to, you know, make that work. So it's probably enough for me. Back to you, Yvette.
Thank you, Mark. Very interesting. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Simone. Before I introduce Peter to speak, just want to outline what our vision is under the Electric Vehicle Action Plan. So bearing in mind this statewide network program is just one of 10 actions that we have under the Electric Vehicle Action Plan. You can find, if you haven't read that and you want to, it's available online at electricvehicles.sa.gov.au. So our vision is to be a national leader in electric vehicle uptake and smart charging by 2025. We want to harness our abundant renewable energy resources by using, and Peter will get more into explain that link shortly. So the benefits are, if it's done well, which we intend to do, the benefits are it's going to reduce motoring and energy costs for all South Australians, not just those that can afford to buy one, and also the additional benefits of lowering air noise and carbon pollution. Next slide, please. So what does it look like? We've put aside $13.4 million in grant funding towards electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That money will be available to charge point operators and similar entities that bid into that program to deploy the infrastructure at sites such as yours. The key goal that we're seeking to address is removing the barriers, or the main barrier to electric vehicle uptake, which, as Mark mentioned, is driving range anxiety. So we want to have consumers to have the confidence that they can get to where they need to go. And a visible fit for purpose charging network is going to help. So potential sites include shopping centres, car parks, supermarkets, town centres, council-owned sites and public amenities, and also, of course, yourselves, small businesses and hotels, motels and holiday parks. So I'll just, if you could flick to the next slide, Simone, and I'll just introduce, so Peter Nattrass is now going to speak at more depth into those points.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you, Mark. So Mark mentioned about brakes on cars. I've got a Mitsubishi Outlander, a plug-in, and I can attest that with 120,000 kilometres on the clock, with my wife driving that for business, we have plenty of meat still on those brake pads. There's no need, Mitsubishi tell us there's no need to replace those brake pads. So when you look at that vehicle, and that meets a lot of our city driving, once we get full electric vehicles on the road that out and about, the user experience will you know, really start to reshape people's opinions about what's possible in an electric car when you have one that can do 400, 500 kilometres. So a colleague and I recently went from Adelaide to Port Augusta, about 30 degrees, air conditioner on 2/3 of the way, headlights on, and we made it there comfortably. So right now there's people that you know, can get out and about for business and pleasure. So again, just referring to what Mark had said, 2025, this crossover point where we have conventional vehicles that we're all getting around in, they become electric vehicles crossover, and that total cost of ownership equalises. That's when we think there's a real need for us to have the infrastructure in place ready for when customers want to make that switch. So it's about empowering customers so that they have the choice, that when the vehicles are there at the right price, that they can pick them up and run with it. Now, prior to that point, there's of course lots of people that are already looking at these, and our focus is on fleets. Fleets are all ready for fleets that do lots of kilometres, getting out into the regions and the like. Electric vehicles are already stacking up for them on paper, and we know from the inquiry rates that they're seriously looking at taking on electric vehicles. So This is about preparation. It's about the vehicles are coming, and it's about preparing our electricity system and the highways and the tourism routes so that they've got these electric vehicle charging services in place. So some of the modelling that we did looked at the potential that by 2030, long way off 2050, by 2030, we could have 50% vehicle sales. So 50% of new vehicles sold in the passenger segment would be electric. So that's a pretty rapid change from at the moment. There's a handful sold every year, less than 1%. As Mark mentioned, that's backed up by when you look at right-hand drives like the United Kingdom, banning the sale of combustion engines by 2030. The change will occur before 2030. So hence 2025 we're working towards. So today I just want to run through what we're looking at. We've got people on the line with accommodation and small business. So I'll try to address some of your areas of interest. So if we could move to the next slide. So the map on the screen reflects what we released prior to Christmas, which was the statewide network, and it's really mapping those major roads there. Following that process, we continue to do our work, and the work that we've been doing leading into the release of that and out of it is that we were looking at making sure that the infrastructure, these chargers, the highway charging is, you're not driving more than 2 hours to get it. We want them more frequent than that. We want it to be where people are already stopping. So we've continued to look at where people are stopping already on highways or in towns. We looked at the topography of these routes to look at what's the real world driving range, because we need to calibrate the charging stations to what the batteries of these vehicles can do and what they'll be able to do in the future. We also, like I said, continue to adjust that. And so what you see on the screen at the moment, this will change over time based upon the expressions of interest that we've received, but also based upon the continued body of work that we are doing and what industry will bring back to us as to where they think they should go. Next slide, please. So we're really focused upon this road trip anxiety. So this idea of when you're in your home environment, you've got a charger on the wall, it's safe. You know that you can always go home and charge. And most people will only need to charge once a week because with 300, 400 kilometres of range, a lot of people's driving will be met by that. But when you're away from that home environment, you're not within your safety zone. And so this is where highway charging comes in, and you can see on the screen there's already technology being deployed that can do up to 350 kilometres of range extension in 10 minutes. So that's as quick as filling up a petrol vehicle, with the advantage that you don't have to stand at the Bowser, that you can be plugged in, off doing what you need to do at the petrol station, getting your food, calling people, using the facilities. Shopping centres. This is about integrating these chargers into people's normal daily routines. It's about multitasking. People want to be able to, they're busy. They want to know that predictability, that they can go to a shopping centre in a country town and that there's a chance that there'll be charging there, so they can grab food or go to the main street and take a walk around, and while they're taking a walk around and having a look in the town centre, they can recharge their vehicle. For tourist accommodation, really important part of what the network needs to have is that when we look at where people are in the middle of the day, they're on the highway, they're moving around, they're at their destinations, they're having an experience, and so when they come to the evening, they don't want to be standing at a charger. They want to be relaxing. They want to be, we'd like them to be in your restaurant or in your bar or at your business, having another experience. Because when we talk to prospective users, they're very much about cost, convenience, experience. When they're in their home environment, it's all about convenience. So they want to be able to multitask. When they're out on holidays or business on the road, we hear about experience. They want to know about the bakery. They want a view. They want line of sight to their vehicle because they've got valuables in it. So this all shapes the kind of experience that the charging network will be made of. So it's not just about ultra rapid. It's about keeping that ultra rapid, that fast charging infrastructure that's at highway and in shopping centres, keeping that for the people who really need it. The highest charge for the people who are in transit and they're on the go. Accommodation and so hotels, motels and holiday parks. Already we know there's people that are running extension cords. It's about putting a formal system in place that enables that to actually have revenue. So it's no longer just sneaky charge. It's about having some service in place so that there's an expectation that if you are staying at accommodation, you don't just sneaky charge, you actually use the appropriate service. So highways keep people moving. Shops optimise the dwell time so they spend their money in the shops. Motels, it's about charging overnight, but it's about that predictability that they come to your motel and they can get a reliable charge. But importantly for your infrastructure, it's making sure that it's charging when the air conditioners are not on, so that there's not big switchboard upgrades. If I can just move to the next slide. So what makes a site suitable? Connectivity. I mentioned about billing, about the days of giving electricity away for charging need to be well and truly behind us. So it needs to have NBN or mobile phone coverage so that they can have billing systems. Also, phone access so that they can potentially activate and turn the charger on if that's the system that's being used. It's about what's on your site, the services, the amenities. It's about them being able to kick back and relax, or have a coffee, buy food in your business, or it's about the businesses and the other attractions around your store. It's about that experience that they're seeking because they're on holiday or they've got a break and they know they've got 15 to 30 minutes and they want to fill that time. So they also want to be, feel if it's night time, that there's good lighting. So they, like everyone, if you're, nighttime, you don't really want to stand in a dark car park which no one can see you. So it's about passive surveillance, so people can see these parking bays so that they feel a sense of safety and security. It's also about suitability is about keeping the cost per charging bay down. So the closer they can get to your switchboard, then that reduces the costs of putting the infrastructure in, because they don't have to do as much trenching. They don't disturb gardens. These important considerations so they can put it in at the lowest cost. In terms of electrical infrastructure, small business or accommodation, really, this is where the smart bit came in that Yvette mentioned. We don't just want to have electric vehicle charging, we want to have smart charging. So in accommodation and smaller businesses, it's really about smart demand management. So as I mentioned, the air conditioning, we're keen to make sure that these chargers work within the existing electricity demands of your site. Your first priority in your business is probably keeping the air conditioning on a hot day. It's not necessarily about charging a person's vehicle. So making sure that it gets its priorities right and the charging fits in as another part of your business, not a part of your business that is disruptive. Next slide, please. In terms of what's in it, the questions, the benefits, it is a question about what's in it for you and your business, but it's also a question of what's in it for your community. Because what's really important when we have technology disruption is making sure that if you're en route or if you are beneficiary of the current behaviours, it's repositioning or making sure you're positioned for that change. So this is about that first mover opportunity to really be positioned for, as Mark mentioned about these vehicles coming, it's getting your property on the map, making sure that people get in the habit of coming back to your business because they know there's a predictable, reliable charge and there's a good experience that goes with it. It's about the benefits are about customers staying longer. The research that we've come across shows they typically drivers stay about 20 minutes longer and they spend about $1 per minute extra. So it's about extra spend. And it's also about that the state's transport emissions. So transport emissions account for 30% of the state's greenhouse emissions. And with the state's ambitious but realistic goal of 50% reduction by 2030, participating and putting your site forward in this really helps the state and our community to achieve that shared ambition of net zero emissions by 2050. So, thank you for stepping forward and putting your property in the mix. Next slide, please. In terms of what we'd be looking at for hotels, motels and holiday parks, we really are looking at a minimum of 2 charging stations and they need to be smart charging, as I mentioned earlier. So previously there was a rollout of chargers and they're not smart, so they are just on or off, and they're typically on and they were free. So that's at the expense of the operator. So that's an important service for when it came through. We're looking at chargers that, as I mentioned, have a billing system so that they have a business case and they're not a cost to you, they're cost neutral, or there's potentially some revenue that comes through them. But it starts with 2 and it ends with we don't know how many. But the important thing is to start with it smart and working within that electricity load so that you can learn and so the charge point operator can also get to know your business and what your customers need. It's about making sure that is a new service that is really becomes that compelling point of difference for your business. That when electric vehicles at the moment, they're spoiled with choice potentially in your area about where they can get petrol or diesel, but they will seek out electric vehicle charging stations. And so we're wanting to make sure that there's 2 as a minimum. They potentially might propose more, and that will come down to what they see as the likely demand in your area. But importantly, it's making sure that it can be scaled. So we want to make sure it starts with 2, but it can scale potentially to 6 or more. Next slide, please. So the key is to ask questions in terms of what do you need to be mindful of. It's on that last slide was about ask for smart, test them, make sure that that you push for, have a look at the funding guidelines and look at what we will be asking for and aim high and see what value you can get out of them. So ask the questions that we encourage you to look at is, as well, who will own the chargers, who will operate them, who fixes them, who answers the phones when it doesn't work. Because we'll certainly be requiring that it's a 24/7, so 24/7 helpline, and we need to know yourselves about if it breaks, if it doesn't work, how quick will they give you a commitment that they'll send someone out to repair it, because ultimately it's your customer. It might have their sticker on it, but it's on your property, and it will be important that that level of service that people are used to when they come to your property, be it your business or your accommodation, the same high standard of responsiveness is maintained. Who will pay for the electricity? As I've mentioned, the days of giving it away, need to be behind us, these need to pay their way. So it's no expectation that you'd be giving electricity. It should be that these charges should at least cover the cost of the electricity they use. There'll be electricity upgrades trying to use that existing infrastructure you've got. There may be some need in some situations where there might be switchboard upgrades required. In that instance, that would be the responsibility of the charge point operator. They've triggered that upgrade, and that's what we entertain. If the need is there, we'd be open to exploring what those costs are. Disruption to your business. Inquire about, would there be disruption? Where would that? How many hours? How many days? What would the disruption? What time of year is it likely that they do? Can they avoid long weekends and your peak periods? Are there times of day between checkout where you just don't want to, need to talk to people? So just manage that expectation, that relationship from day one as you're engaging with them. If you've already got charges on your property, we are interested in how we can actually get those charges put onto a smart system. So we'd have to, of course, have the charge point operator look at what the existing agreements are, but it's already entertained through the retailer energy productivity scheme that charges that are existing on properties can already be, retailers can support those charges to be put onto smart controls. So the government has already, been looking at this for quite a while of how we actually move that equipment into a smarter environment. Next slide, please. Timeframes. You'll see on the left-hand side there, the red. So that was prior to Christmas. That was the registration period that closed on the 15th of February. So thank you for your registrations. There's still the opportunity to register. So if you've got colleagues or friends who are around you or in other regions, we have certainly looking for more hotels, motels and holiday parks. Very keen to have registrations in that area. So we're now in the blue, the evaluation, and we're moving into that green patch there, which is where we'll go out to the competitive grants process. Really important to note that government won't own these charges. They will be privately owned, be it by the charge point operator, or they may propose some contribution or model where you may own them. But that's really needs to be what they present to yourself. So in that period, they'll prepare their proposals for government, and that'll be about an 8-week period at least where they will have the opportunity to prepare. They'll most likely be contacting you. Your details will be provided in a secure online environment, so basically a data room where they will make contact with us and then log in to then access the details. We'd expect that they will contact the people, the sites that they are looking at. If they don't contact you during this period, it's don't necessarily be alarmed, but because they may be doing a lot of Google Street View or aerial surveys because they do have to cover the whole state. We then expect that they would submit those applications into government, and that's when we do our assessments on them, and then they'll come back to you if they haven't already got an in-principle agreement in place to do a formal agreement to then be able to undertake the works. If you approached by multiple providers, certainly a good idea to keep the door open to a few, because we don't know which ones will be successful, but there's no harm in registering with multiple, because at the end of the day it's about choice for yourself as to which one works for you, and then through our evaluation process we'll look for the value for government and the value for the community, and then the successful person will come back to people they've engaged with. Construction, the higher powered charges. So if you've got a business, it could be a higher powered charge. That could take a little bit longer because there may be SA Power Network connections and development approvals. If it's a accommodation, lower powered charges, that should be a more straightforward, unless there's engineering works that they need to do because of switchboards. This project fits into an overall timeframe. So 2021, this is about the grants process. It's about awarding the grants, and it's about getting construction started. 2022, it's about the builds well and truly underway. We've got hopefully more vehicles starting to move out because people have got the confidence, fleets, they're moving out and using these chargers. 2023, it should all be constructed, finished, and that's well and truly ready for when, you know, the mass market of vehicles is expected to arrive. So it's about preparation and anticipation of it, so that we don't end up with people in your area, you know, needing to have a bit of a sneaky charge. It's about having the systems in place so that people aren't losing money. I think that's the next slide. I think that's open for questions, Yvette.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So we don't have any questions for this session. That's fine. I'll just talk for a couple more minutes, so that if you do have any questions, just type them in now to that little speech bubble icon with a question mark on it. So we've had some great questions from some of the previous sessions that we've done. What we'll do is we'll develop those into an FAQ, and we'll put them online, and we'll also make this presentation available online, and one or more of the recordings of these sessions. So if you do need to come back and have any a further listen, you can. We will send you an email with links to those once they've been prepared. And obviously in the meantime, you can contact us. So Simone, if you just want to chuck up the last slide. So we're here to help. If you want any further information, you can email electricvehicles@sa.gov.au or call the number on the screen. You can also visit the website electricvehicles.sa.gov.au, and you'll find a bunch of information there. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your interest, and we look forward to seeing how the network rolls out over the coming months.